Chapter 6: The Art of China, Salt Production in Ancient China. 1. The Annals of Emperor Yu, the Birth of State Control. In the ancient history of China, before the Great Wall, before the Silk Road, before anything else, the state was built on salt. The very first records of Chinese civilization, the ancient scrolls of Emperor Yu, tell us something remarkable, something that would shape an empire for thousands of years to come. Salt was declared the property of the throne. Not the land, not the rivers, not the forests, salt. Emperor Yu, the legendary founder of China's first dynasty, understood something no other ruler before him had grasped. Salt is something every human being must have, every single day, without exception. And if you control the salt, you control everything. The emperor sent officials across the empire, to the coastline, to the salt wells of the interior, men whose only job was to watch, to count, to weigh every grain that was harvested, and to stamp it with the imperial seal. This was the world's first true monopoly, not built on greed, but on biology. The money that flowed in from the salt tax was staggering. It funded armies, it built canals, massive waterways that linked the great rivers of China and carried grain and salt from one end of the empire to the other. A perfect cycle. Salt paid for the canals carried the salt, and the empire grew. But there was something deeper at work here too. By controlling the salt, the emperor became the ultimate provider. When drought struck, when floods destroyed the harvest, the imperial storehouses opened, and salt reached the people. A gift from the throne, but also a reminder. To eat salt in China was to participate in the state. Every citizen, every meal, every grain on the tongue connected them directly to the power of the Son of Heaven. Salt was the first instrument of mass governance, a crystalline thread binding millions of people to a single throne. 2. Shantung Engineering, the Evolution of Brine Ovens. On the coast of Shantung, the air never cleared. A perpetual haze hung over the shore, a thick, pearly fog, half sea mist, half steam, drifting between rows of bubbling cauldrons that stretched as far as the eye could see. This was the engine room of the Chinese Empire. And the men who worked here, moving through the white haze like ghosts, were not just laborers. They were engineers. The Western world was still boiling salt over open fires in simple iron pans, but in Shantung, something far more sophisticated had been built, the brine oven. Not a single pit of flame, but a complex system of underground channels, tunnels carved beneath the ground that carried the heat from one fire beneath several large, shallow pans at the same time. One flame, many pans, maximum heat, minimum fuel. It was an architectural masterpiece disguised as a kitchen, and the men who tended these ovens had developed a remarkable skill. They could control the temperature of the brine with precision, and by doing so, they could separate the pure salt from the bitter minerals that contaminated it. Too hot, and the wrong crystals form. Too cool, and the salt stays dissolved. The perfect flame, the perfect moment, the perfect crystal. The breakthrough came during the Han Dynasty, when engineers introduced large pans cast from iron, strong enough to withstand hours of continuous boiling, wide enough to speed up the process enormously. A single Shantung facility could now produce more salt in one day than a dozen primitive coastal sites. The result was a salt so pure and white it was said to rival the snow of the northern mountains. This was not luxury. This was survival. Without the Shantung ovens, without their efficiency, their heat, their relentless output, China could not have fed its cities, could not have preserved the fish and vegetables that kept millions alive through the long winters. The strength of the dynasty was measured in the temperature of its furnaces. 3. Botanical catalysts, the use of the Tsao-Chio tree. The ovens provided the heat. The engineers provided the skill. But the true secret of Chinese salt came from the forest. Picture a master salinator standing over a massive cauldron of brine. The liquid is murky, clouded with silt and bitter minerals and organic debris pulled up from the deep wells underground. If this brine is left to crystallize on its own, the salt will be gray, bitter, unfit for the imperial table. And so, the master reaches for something. A dark, thick liquid extracted from the ponds of a tree called the Tsao-Chio, a tree that grows quietly in the forests of central China, unremarkable to look at, but extraordinary in what it does. He pours it into the boiling brine. And watch. The moment the extract hits the liquid, something happens, something almost miraculous. The impurities, the silt, the bitter minerals, and the invisible dirt suspended in the water, they begin to clump together, to gather, to rise, up through the liquid, slowly, steadily, until they break the surface in a thick, dark froth. The salinator skims it away with a long bamboo ladle, and beneath that dark scum, the brine is clear, diamond clear, sparkling, purified. This was the first known use of a natural cleaning agent in industrial history, the pods of a single tree solving a problem that Western chemistry would not understand for centuries. The salt produced from this purified brine was called snow salt. Blindingly white, crystalline, pure. It was reserved for the emperor, for the temples, for the highest officials of the land, and the secret of the Tsao-Chio tree was guarded like a treasure. By controlling both the salt and the tree that purified it, the state held absolute power over the quality of every grain in the empire. The forest and the furnace working together. The first industrial chemists on Earth wore no laboratory coats. They wore the robes of ancient China. 4. Classification of quality: white, dark, and yellow salts. In China, salt was not one thing. It was many. And the color of the crystal on your plate told the world exactly who you were. The Chinese state developed a system, a rigid, meticulous ranking of salt, by color, by origin, by purity. And at the very top, white salt, also called snow crust or silver grains. This was the salt of the Shantung ovens, purified with Tsao-Chio extract, blindingly white, sharp and clean on the tongue with no bitter edge, no metallic taste, nothing but pure, crystalline salt. This was imperial grade, reserved for the emperor's own table, for the sacred rituals of the ancestral temples, for the highest officials of the court. To possess white salt in the provinces was either a mark of great honor or dangerous corruption. Now, step down one level. Yellow salt, harvested from the sun-baked lagoons of the southern coast or from the shallower wells of the interior. Its golden color came from iron-rich clay and trace minerals that the workers could not, or chose not to, filter out. The flavor was different, more complex, earthy, with a rounded bitterness that added depth rather than sharpness. This was the salt of merchants, of landowners, of the wealthy but not the powerful. It was prized in its own right, used to make the great fermented pastes, to cure thick-skinned vegetables, a salt that brought complexity to the food, not just flavor. And at the base, dark salt, earth salt, coarse, gray, sometimes black, heavy with impurities, magnesium, calcium, grit. It was bitter, sometimes harsh on the tongue, but it was the salt that kept China alive. This was the salt of the peasants, the laborers, the millions who worked the fields and the mines. It was the cheapest to produce, the most widely consumed, and the greatest source of revenue for the throne. The state controlled its flow with iron precision. 3 colors, 3 worlds. White for the gods, yellow for the merchants, dark for the earth. In China, even the taste of life was sorted by station. The color of the crystal on your tongue told everyone in the room exactly where you stood.
Five, the solar shift, 15th century evaporation technology. By the 15th century, the Ming Dynasty had a problem. The forests were dying. Centuries of relentless burning, feeding the brine ovens day and night, had stripped the ancient woods bare. The cost of wood and charcoal had become crippling. The old way of making salt, fire-boiled, furnace-driven, was becoming impossible to sustain. So China did something extraordinary. It looked up, at the sun, and it reimagined the coastline entirely. Where once there had been deep kilns and roaring furnaces, now there were terraces, vast stepped platforms carved into the shore, shallow pans stretching out in long ordered rows toward the sea. No fire, no smoke, no furnace, just sunlight and water and time. The system was elegant in its simplicity. Seawater was channeled inland through a series of channels and pools, each one slightly shallower than the last. Wind-powered pumps and the pull of gravity moved the water forward, deeper and deeper into the process. In the first pools, the sun began its slow work, heating the water, drawing the moisture into the air, concentrating the salt within. As the brine grew stronger, it was moved to the final pools, flat beds paved with dark stone or packed clay, surfaces designed to drink in the sun's heat and radiate it back into the water. And there, the salt began to bloom, white crystals breaking the surface, growing, spreading, like flowers opening in slow motion. The workers who tended these fields became something new, not stokers of fire, but readers of the sky. They watched the clouds, they felt the wind, they studied the shimmer of the water to know precisely when the harvest was ready. When the moment came, they moved in with long wooden rakes, sweeping the crystals into great white mounds along the shore. Mountains of salt stretching to the horizon, built not by flame, but by the ancient, patient power of the sun. This shift changed everything. The sun was free. The output was vast. China could now produce salt on a scale that no furnace could match. But it came with a new vulnerability. A long, wet summer, a season of rain and cloud, and a province could go bankrupt. The solar shift was the final chapter in the story of Chinese salt, a move away from violence and consumption toward rhythm, toward patience, toward a quiet partnership between civilization and the sky.